Good morning. Welcome. Let me be the first to hopefully welcome you to day 2 of the summit. Hope everybody had a good day yesterday after getting through some of the lines that we saw. Saw some good sessions, a lot of good information coming across. Introduce myself. My name is Ryan Jankaitis, right there on the bottom. I'm a product manager at Amazon Web Services. Joining me today later is Caroline Humer. Caroline is the director of the Global Missing Children Center at the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. A little bit of background about myself. I joined AWS about 2 years ago in the product management side, focused on public sector customers. And what we do is work with customers across public sector who have a big or a small, core business challenge, something that they want to address, but they're not exactly sure if it's possible, they're not exactly sure how to start, and they're not exactly sure what the outcomes could be, right? So we come in, my team comes in and tries to demonstrate what we call the art of the possible using agile practices to demonstrate to them in a tangible working prototype, not just boxes on a whiteboard, boxes on a PowerPoint, an actual working prototype of how their core business problems can be solved using AWS. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the best practices and theories that we apply on a regular basis with our customers to try to help them solve those problems. And then Caroline will come up and give a demonstration, an overview of her challenges, what they did, and what we did to help them solve those. All right? A little bit of background about myself as well. I came from a software background. I developed code for 6 years, focused on enterprise storage. I've been building products, managing teams, building out portfolios of products for the last 16 years. And now I'm working directly with customers on a regular basis, which is a lot of fun. So, what do you think of when you think of Agile, right? The first thing most people think of when I say Agile is Agile programming, is some sort of methodology, there's Scrum teams involved, there's story points involved, there's all this day-to-day activity that helps you develop code. Well, if that's your expectation here, let me just set your expectations. We are not going to get down to that level of discussion. If you want to talk to me afterwards about how we run our Scrum teams or how we set story points or how we prioritize, I'm happy to talk about that. Okay? But for expectations perspective, we are going to stay a little bit higher level and focus on the theories of how, if you have a core problem, if you have something that you're trying to solve, but things are stopping you, how can those theories, put in practice, how can they help you get there? Right? So my argument that I'm going to try to convey to you today is that Agile is more than just a programming methodology. It's not just Agile versus Waterfall. It's not just Scrum and Kanban and all those terminologies. Right? Agile, to me, is a mindset. When you have a problem to tackle, do you put in tactical processes, or can you take it to a higher level, apply some best practices based on Agile methodologies, and take that mindset and say, yes, I can solve this problem? And that's what I want to try to show you today, that you can take this home and apply it to yourselves. Right? So as I'm going through, hopefully, you guys have in the back of your mind a core problem that your management has brought to you, that you see on a day-to-day basis. You have a new product you think could be useful, or it could just be a small little thing that's been nagging you and you're not quite sure how to go about fixing it. So hopefully you can have some of those in the back of your mind as I'm going through this talk. Okay? So what is that Agile mindset? This is my personal definition after 18 plus years of developing products and developing code. What I like to look at Agile is how do I get the maximum amount of value out of the smallest amount of time, right? What can I do to break this down into small chunks, small pieces of time? And that could be a day, it could be a year, right? Time is relative. What does value mean? Value is relative. It really comes down to who are you trying to solve this for, and what value will it provide if it is solved? How do I maximize those two? How do I make sure I'm not spending 12 months delivering something that nobody really cares about? Right? It's not easy. It's hard. But if you have that mindset, if you look at how you can look at what's the outcome of this, who will like this, what value is this providing, and how long can we get there, you'll find that it's really effective in breaking down those problems that seem unsolvable. Right? So maybe some of you are thinking, yeah, that sounds great in theory, but my problem is way bigger than that. There's no way I could take this approach, right? This is a massive issue. No one's been able to solve it. We don't think it's possible, right? Or maybe you think it's possible, Maybe you think the technology's out there to do this. Maybe you know some approaches that can address it. But where do I start? How do I know what's that first step? And how do I know, most importantly, if that first step is right? What if it's wrong? What if I chose the wrong direction? What do I do then? Right? And then how do I know which tools are the right ones? Right? I know databases. I know multi-tier applications. I know nothing about NoSQL. I know nothing about Elasticsearch. How do I know what's the right tools for me? How can I make sure that if I'm making a long-term investment, that I made the right one from the start? What happens if I did wrong? These are the questions that I hear every day when I go out and talk to customers. They have a core problem. They know it's important to solve. But this analysis paralysis, these barriers to entry, these stopping points are things that don't let projects get off the ground. I'm here to tell you today, through these practices and using AWS, that we think we can solve them. So let's go some examples, right? US Census Bureau. They're talking, unfortunately, right now. The CTO is talking in a different room with a member of my team. And they came to us and said, listen, we have petabytes of data, all this survey information. We need a better way to provide shared access to that, while also utilizing all this legacy programs that we have that take advantage of that data, right? Petabytes and petabytes of files, CSV files, data files, acres and acres of SAS program and R program. How do I take all of that, put it into the cloud, and make it easier and faster for my analysts to run code against that data? Most importantly, is it secure? Can we make sure the right person can see the right data? So if I'm not allowed to see Social Security information, I don't see any data that has that. And can I reduce the number of copies of that data that I have? ICAO, International Center of Aviation. It's a UN organization that focuses on developing best practices for training, safety, airline registration, right? With unmanned aircraft coming in, it's a big problem. If an aircraft flies over a restricted zone, there's a pilot in there you can talk to, hopefully. If an airline goes down, there's a pilot in there. You can know what happens. If a commercial unmanned aircraft lands in your backyard, who do you talk to? It's a big problem getting bigger as more and more unmanned vehicles, unmanned aircraft come along. How do we define a system for registering, tracking them, managing them? It's not easy. It's a big problem, right? NIH, National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, is an institute of the NIH. They have terabytes of genomics information, right? They share that with research institutions across the country. But they use third-party services and other tools like Iterate Commons to say who can see what, based on consent groups of that. How do I take all these disparate systems and make sure that data stays in one place? So we don't have to copy terabytes of genomics data. So I can ensure that the right person can see this data at the right time. So I can give easy access to genomics analysis tools like BCF, SAM tools. These are just a small subset of some of the problems that we hear, that we apply these approaches that I'm going to talk about too, right? This can move. So how is this possible with an Agile mindset? To me, Agile is 3 core questions. The first one is why, right? That's the biggest question you need to ask yourself when starting a project. Why do we need to solve this, right? And more importantly, why would a customer use this? Why is this important to them? And when I say customer, it doesn't have to be an external paying customer that you're selling licenses to. It could be, Joe down the hall who's using your service. The customer, when I say customer, let's make sure we say it's not just somebody who's going to give me money to use my product, right? It's critical to ask that question. Why am I doing this? Why do we need to solve this? Why can't they do this already today? Why can we do this better? And why would somebody use this? Really critical questions. If you can't answer those questions clearly and concisely, maybe it's not that big of a problem, and maybe it doesn't need to be solved. All right? The next question is, okay, we think we know why, but who? Who's going to use this? Is it accounting? Is it a researcher? Is it the general public? Is it my management? Who are we actually solving this for? And that doesn't mean you have to solve it for everybody at once. right? Break it down into the most important people, the most amount of value in the shortest amount of time. Who is going to show you that they are getting the most value of this? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the critical people that they say, yes, you have solved my problem? Who is going to use that, right? And then the last question is, what are they going to do with it? What are they going to do that they can't do today? What are they going to do that's better than how they did in the past? What are the actions they're going to take with your solution that will solve their problems? Why, who, and what? Really core, basic questions. It sounds simple, but I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in product development and product strategy meetings. We rarely answer these questions clearly or concisely. So if you have that mindset going in and you stick to these types of questions, it's amazing the type of information that actually comes out. All right, so the first step, how do we start applying this? All right, great theories, great questions. How do we actually start applying this? The first thing we talk about is an Inception. If you're familiar with Agile methodologies, an Inception is where a bunch of stakeholders get in a room, hash out the problem, say, this is what we're going to do. You can do the same thing for your problem, right? Whether it's a small group of people, big project, a migration, doesn't matter. Apply the same process, have an Inception, get into the room with the stakeholders, and clearly state the business challenge. If not everybody in that room can do that, they might not be the right stakeholders. You might not have the right people in there. Or the challenge isn't clearly defined and you need to hash that out. All right? Again, document the why, who, and what. The best way to do this, and this really is an Amazonian approach, is work backwards. What I mean by work backwards is write a press release, right? A press release is a simple 1-paragraph, 2-paragraph statement about the problem, how you solved it, and what's the value about that, right? And if you're thinking, my problem would never go out public, I would never write a press release, no one would ever read this, then think about it this way. If you're at a conference like this with your peers, or you're at lunch with somebody of one of your coworkers, what would you tell them? What key phrases, what key words would you tell them about the cool thing you just did? What are the value statements that you would tell your buddy, or your coworker, or your peer about what you just did? So when I say press statement, it doesn't have to be a public press release that I can Google and search. What are the key terms and phrases that you would use to describe the solution to your coworkers and peers? All right? When you leave that meeting, you need to walk out on the same page with that clear purpose. Every stakeholder needs to be involved from the beginning to the end. If you're constantly catching people up, you're constantly going to get distractions. You're going to get different opinions coming in halfway through. You need to make sure that the right people are in that meeting at the beginning and they leave with the same purpose. You might not all agree, right? There's going to be different agreements on what's valuable, what's critical, what's the top priorities. But if you can come up to at least a consensus of what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, right? You can come into it. But a critical thing during that meeting, when I run these meetings with my customers, if I never mention AWS, I never mention a service, I don't talk about S3, I don't talk about Dynamo, if I can get out of this 6, 7, 8-hour meeting, however long it is, without mentioning a service, that's a valuable meeting, right? Because what are we focused on? We're not focused on technology. Technology shouldn't drive business decisions. We are focused on the business problem, who we're solving it for, why they're going to use it, and what they're going to do with it. Never mention how. If technology is driving your business decisions, then you're talking to the wrong people. All right? So let's go into a different example. I don't want you guys to think this is just about new products. It's not. UK Miniature Justice, they came to us and said, listen, we need to migrate 1,400 applications. Our contract is ending, not only with our service provider and our colo, but we need to re-up on some of the software they were using. This is a big problem, and they needed to do it in about 3 years. They have legacy code. These applications are not just standalone, they're tied together. Really old systems in some cases. They don't know if it's possible. They don't know if they can do that, right? They don't know if they can take this old system running in a colo and put it in the cloud, right? They're focused on civil servants and general public. And what do they want to do? They want to make sure that the barristers, the criminals, anybody who's coming into the legal system using some of these apps, that they have no idea where it's running or what's happened to them, right? And so what does that success look like? After our meeting, we walked out. Okay, let's have a migration of a representative approach. We're not going to do all 1,400 applications at once, right? That's not possible. So how can we look for a representative approach with a documented repeated process? So once AWS steps out, a partner can come in, their team can come in, and they know exactly how to do it. They have a repeatable process to do that. All right, so we've walked out of our Inception meeting. We know what we're trying to do. It's all documented. Everybody's on a clear page. What's next? That's when the planning starts, right? Sprint planning. This is a good term from Agile. A sprint could be a week. It could be 3 weeks. It's totally up to you and how your project is running, how people are involved. But again, when you're planning a sprint, don't just focus on the technologies. At the end of the sprint, the goal is to demo to your stakeholders what you've done, right? So work backwards in that sprint. What do we want to show at the end? What value, compared to the overall scope document or the scope of our project, what value do we want to show in this sprint? We're not just talking, oh, here's a cool technology, look what we did. What value does that actually bring to the overall problem that you've addressed, right? It all comes down to working backwards. We, on our team, run daily stand-ups, sometimes just internal, sometimes with the customers that we're working, right? Every meeting, I ask the same questions if I'm running this meeting. How is this aligned? What have you done in the past 24 hours? How does what you've done align to what we're trying to do? If it doesn't, then we talk about it. Why did you do this? Why are we achieving the values that we're trying to achieve? Right? What are we missing? Is there something that we're not getting from the customer? Is there something we're not getting from ourselves? What's blocking us? And then how we're going to achieve it. This is the first time we talk technology, all the way down to this sprint meeting. We finally start talking about, okay, what's the best practice to do this? Should we use Dynamo? Should we use Elasticsearch? Should we use Redshift? How are we actually going to do this? So, going back to that MOJ example. We did daily sprints with them, which was interesting because they're in the UK and I'm obviously here. Every day, we would talk about what we're trying to do. My team would get together. What are we doing for this sprint? Right? Since all those apps were, most of them were based on an Oracle database, a lot of them were using the same types of databases, a lot of similar data. We focused on that first, working backwards, minimal time to value. We thought this was the most value that we could bring in a short amount of time. Once you get the database out there, focus on the next steps. If those apps are running out there in Oracle and they run great, but there's no data to serve them, who cares? Doesn't matter. You got to get the data there first. Okay? So in our demo, what we wanted to show was a simple, effective, repeatable process to migrate stuff across. Right? Every day, we say, okay, have we met with the DB owner? Do we know the target schema? Do we know how to validate it? What's the migration status? How are we going to script this? What tools are we going to use? What process are we going to use? Right? Does it work? Can I demo this? If I'm going to go in front of the CTO at MOJ to show them what's happening, is it going to be an effective demo? What do I need to do to show them the value that we're bringing to it? Right? This is not a new project. This is just data migration. So when you walk out of here, don't think about Agile as far as just developing new code or new products. These processes can be brought into place for things like data migrations. All right? This is really where AWS Cloud starts to get interesting, is the iteration. Right? You get to the end of the sprint, you show the demo, what did we learn? Right? When you're talking to your stakeholders, what did we learn? What are we going to talk about? Why are we here to talk about what we've just done? What success criteria are we addressing in this demo? And then finally, where are we going next, and are we going in the right direction? If you're not meeting with your stakeholders on a regular basis, if you come in 2 months later, their minds might have changed. They might have forgotten what you guys talked about. They might not have a recollection of that Inception meeting. They might not know why we're all here and what we're trying to achieve. They might have forgotten. There's lots of stuff going on. It's really important to keep talking about what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it, and if you're on the right track. And in the past, if you're trying to do this in a traditional data center, this is really hard to do, right? If you have a big project coming on, you need to plan. Okay, what's my storage capacity? What's my storage growth? What's my performance needs? What's my security needs? What's the operating system that I need? What kind of software do I need? What's their licensing? What's their procurement cycle? Lots of questions, lots of reasons to say, yeah, I don't know if this project is going to work, right? If you do all that stuff, you procure all that software, you're talking a 12, 18, 24-month commitment at the minimum. What if you get in a month and it doesn't work? What are you going to do with that stuff for the next 16 months, 17 months? Are you just going to abandon it? You're going to try to force it to work? Maybe cutting corners here and there, it works okay, good enough, right? Those are the types of things that come up all the time. Say, I don't think we can do this. I don't know how to do this. I don't want to make that investment if it doesn't work. That's really where the values of the AWS cloud can start to show up. Depth and breadth of services, NoSQL versus Elasticsearch, Redshift versus Athena, right? What's the best tool for me? If it doesn't work, throw it away and try something else. I haven't bought a 12-month license. I don't have any renewal. I haven't bought any new hardware. Iterate, experiment, try it. Does it work or not? If not, try something different. There's no cost to that. Okay, the last thing you want to do after however many sprints it is, my team, we generally run 6-8 sprints with our engagements. Yours could be longer, could be shorter, but you want to get down to the end. We think we're done. We think we've done everything we needed to do. We think we've done everything we set out to do. So let's recap the challenges. Let's recap the success criteria. Show what's happening, right? How did what we've been working on, how did what we just deliver address that? And ask the core question of your stakeholders, were we successful? It's a critical question. You want to walk out of that meeting saying, I was successful or I wasn't. It's a black and white answer, right? Hopefully. Hopefully you're successful. But if you weren't successful, or if you were, what's next? All right, I did all this cool stuff. I showed it's possible. I created this demo. We created success criteria. What's next? Then you reiterate, right? It's small chunks, bigger chunks. Continue to reiterate. All right, going back to here. UK Ministry of Justice. What does success look like? We talked about that. Some of the outcomes. We proved through a repeatable process that we could migrate one of their legacy systems from a multi-tier legacy application into a more modernized, containerized solution in AWS in a scripted manner. Right? They're trying to get all those 1,400 plus apps into AWS by 2020. This was just a start, really small start, but we showed them that it was possible. Taking old code from 15 years ago, really old stuff, modernizing it, migrating it, having it run, and looking exactly like it did in the old days. All right? And we asked them, were we successful? They said yes, luckily, through a lot of work from my team, and now they're working with a partner to start the migration, right? That's what's next. And we just heard this week that two of their apps have successfully been cut live into AWS. So they are following the best practices that we put forward through this agile and sprint planning methodology to actually start moving this information across. All right, so enough of me talking about my customers. Caroline's going to come up and talk about the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children and how we put these practices in place for her mission and her problem. You got it.
So as Ryan said, I'm part of the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We are an international nonprofit organization based here in Virginia, just outside of DC, where we essentially, where we work to protect children from sexual abuse, exploitation, and abduction globally. What I do as part of the Global Missing Children Center is oversee our Missing Children's program that allows us to work with law enforcement, NGO, and government to help them find children in their country. The one ways we do that is through our Global Missing Children's Network, or GMCN, which currently consists of 28 countries and 32 members, where NGOs and law enforcement come together to essentially help understand what the issue is of missing children, how to find them, what technology can be used, and what are the trends or what are the challenges that each of them are facing. And one of the tools that we provide is a global missing children's database where they can upload missing children information to basically to create a poster of a missing child that they can distribute to the public in the help for the search. Sounds pretty simple. It is, and it needs to be simple because every country works differently. Difficulty that we have is the amount of volume and the different kind of clienteles that we have between law enforcement, NGO, and government. These are just some of the statistics that we know of related to missing children. Unfortunately, not every country looks at this issue. So we don't know how many children go missing around the world on a yearly basis or on a day-to-day basis. We just have some of these numbers because some countries actually have databases that they use to collect this information. So that's the hard part. So our job, or my job, is also to build awareness around this issue. So the technology part is just a small tool that we provide to the Global Missing Children's Network members to be able to find missing children who are either being exploited, who are being sold, or are in forced labor, you name it. We sort of say missing is the gateway to a lot of issues that I just mentioned, including they don't get access to education or access to health, and we need to be able to actually find these children to be able to protect them. So to be able to do that, we have this global database. This database really is as simple as it can be, because each country has a different technology set up. If they have a database, great, but they have built it differently than ours. If they don't have a database, some don't have a book. They use a book to actually record crimes. So how do we get that data in our system? Or if they don't collect data because they think they don't have missing children, how do we convince them that they actually should use a database? So you can see how difficult our job is. And when we came to AWS, after 15 years of doing this, I was like, help. I don't know what to start with because I'm going around in circles. I have 3 different customers. I have 196 countries that I want to target. Everyone is different, and everyone has different needs. So where do I start? How do I make sure that I can get to each client or customer to make sure that they can use our global database for their needs? And that's when Ryan and his team came in and explained to us the why, who, and what, and really narrowed it down to us in our group and sat down for probably a couple of days and went through it and said, okay, explain this issue to me. What is the complexity? Why is it so complex? What is it that's stopping you from understanding how to do this, or for them not to use the system? So they asked hard questions, which I sometimes couldn't answer, and I had to go back to my customers, to law enforcement and NGOs, and ask them the question, going, what do you want? Where do you want it? How do you want it? What is it that you're actually lacking? What is the challenge that we can help you with on a technology side? Once we understood that we needed a very mobile, flexible database that they can use wherever they are, on a mobile phone or on a laptop or even on a tablet, great. What else do you need? Well, we need to be able to upload the information instantly. Okay, great. And so we started looking at the why. And we then looked at making sure that the system is simple, but at the same time secure. Because law enforcement, and I don't know if there's law enforcement in the room, but if you're familiar, law enforcement is very particular about sharing data. So they want secure information. They want to make sure that if they share information, it doesn't just get accessed by anybody. So we needed to make sure that there are different levels of access to the database between NGOs and law enforcement. And how do they share the data between each other, if at all? Does it make sense if we have 465,000 children missing in the US that Australia needs to look at those? Most likely, no. Maybe a few, not even a few hundred, but maybe 20 or so would maybe end up in Australia, if that. So they don't need access to all of them. So we needed to look at that as well and make it flexible and be able to scale it. We wanted to scale it so that not only 28 countries have access to this, but in the end, our goal is to have 196 countries accessing this and making it a truly global database to help find missing children and to actually know how big this issue is. So we actually have data so that no country can come back to me and say, we don't have missing children. I could say, well, actually you do. And here's how and why. And here's how we can help you. So who are our customers? As I already mentioned, they're essentially caseworkers, either in an NGO that works with law enforcement or government officials, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Security, or law enforcement themselves. So we needed different levels of access for them as well. And what we wanted to do is make sure that they can actually use the database, not only to create posters and put them up, but that they can search it easily and use it in different ways to search, through not only text, but also image. We also wanted to implement a background image so that they could actually search the background of an image to say, okay, I have a beige couch in the background of this missing child's photo. Maybe that beige couch has been somewhere else. Well, let's run it through the system, beige couch. Or if it's a plant or something that be able to connect one missing child with another or the same images together. That's what we were looking for, to be able to make this more useful and more effective for law enforcement to find missing children quicker and easily, because law enforcement, as well as NGOs, and probably government too, have limited resources. We are limited by what we've got access to. So most of them don't have this ability. They can't access an image search and image recognition software from AWS. We can, so let's try to make sure they get access to it. What does the success look like? We looked at everything that we needed to do, and I'll show you some of the sprints that we did, but we had, as I said, it was a complex issue with multiple different things that we wanted to achieve. We want to achieve that scalability. We want to achieve that they're using the system. But we also want to make sure that we're not duplicating the efforts. So the cases or the countries that already have databases, we don't want them to access it in their database and then come into ours. It's too much work. So what we wanted to look at is how do we make it as simple and as effective for them. So we looked at integrating the existing databases in countries that they already have with ours through an API. We looked at image matching through AWS facial recognition software recognition, as well as AI services, and then looking at the text and image search so that they could go through the database and see what comes up if I put in blue dress or tattoo with AX on it. What will come up? That's the kind of thing that we wanted to make sure that can work, as well as using and going through the system and making the system easy and friendly. The user interface for law enforcement and NGOs needs to be as simple without any explanation, because they don't have the time to sit there going through a manual. Okay, so now I need to click where, submit, okay, then no. And that was our current system. So what we really needed is a simple system, click, 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 submit, done. That's what we were looking for. So with the sprint plan with AWS, we started through that. We started going through that, and they narrowed it down for us with all of these issues and challenges that I was voicing out, going, I don't know where to go. Where do I start? I have API, I want the text, I want the image, I have 28 different countries with different databases. Where do I start? And they really made it clear and narrowed it down to the most common denominator to essentially explain to us, just think simple. Don't get away from your head and don't think about the other stuff. Think about what is the main point of this. And that's where we started. And so one of the first things that we did is provide AWS access to the data that we already had so they could play around with it and actually see what is in there, to actually understand the issue and the database itself. And through that, we did the different sprints. And we did these sprints a lot of times. We didn't do them face-to-face. We did them online through Chime or Hangout or whichever one you want to use, because that was the easiest way. But it was once a week, sit down for an hour, hour and a half, two, and said, okay, here's what we talked about last week. Here's what we achieved. What do you think? And I was the only non-tech person on that call or in those rooms, because everybody else had a tech background. And I was like, well, wait a minute. As a user, here's what I see. And they're like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. I'm like, okay, so I'm not a techie. I don't understand the codes. I never did codes. But I understood what my customers wanted. I understood what I wanted. And so that's something that we then worked through to be able for them to understand how they need, or how, to be able to code or program the information to make sure that I got what I wanted for our customers. So we also planned the integration and all of that. We then looked at the basic web front end and the text search. As I mentioned, text search seems pretty simple because we use Google every time. But in a database, you want to be able to connect into that, being able to search for every little thing because you don't know what you're looking for when it comes to missing children. So each image may have something in there that I don't know about, or the child's information has more information in there, or the information of where the child went missing, saying that the child went missing at 8 a.m. on I Street here in Washington, D.C. If I can search that and then suddenly find out that, wait a minute, in that radius or on I Street, there's 5 children that went missing in 6 months. Maybe I can connect these 5 cases together. Wouldn't that be great? So text search was really important to us. The same way as the image search, to be able to search, run an image through the system and say, that looks like that girl or boy, that may be the same, or they look similar. Let's see. Or if a child's been missing for 10 years, do I put an image, how do I search for a child that's now been gone for 10 years, but they've grown up? Be able to search and run an image through that to be able to make that happen. Jumped a little here. Image search, case management. The case management needed to be simple and straightforward so that everybody could use it. And I didn't need to spend too much time in training them, but really actually just giving them access with a username, password, secure system. Here's what you need. This is how it works. If you need training, can do it. But it was very simple and straightforward. And then, of course, we had to look at the policies, what policies we put in place, what access, who has which kind of access. Case management from an NGO needs different access than from law enforcement, and for what purposes. What we also want to do is that it's not only running the images against each other in the database, but the other part is connecting into third-party data sets. So what we want to do is be able to say, okay, I have a missing child, went missing in Washington, D.C., but the child could be anywhere. I don't know. Could be in New York, or has managed to get down to Florida. Well, if I can be able to access another organization's data set that they scraped information from the internet, or they have their own database with information that can help me locate a missing child, I want to run that image against that data set. So we've been partnering with 2 or 3, and we'll partner with multiple other organizations that actually collect that data. They scrape information from the internet, keep that data, and we will run a missing child information against their data to see if that child has been posted anywhere on Craigslist or on any other website that you can think of that possibly sells children or traffic children. And that gives law enforcement an instant access to where the child could be and a location. At the same time, it allows us to be able to run this through on a regular basis. And this is why, in the end, we actually started calling this the GMC engine. So Global Missing Children's Network, GMCN, and then an engine at the end, because this is a system, not only now a database that's stale and looking at posters of missing children, but it actually works for law enforcement and NGOs and all the other clients that I've got in there to run the system on a regular basis, 24/7, looking for that child, going, where else could that child be, until there's a hit. And law enforcement can take that information and hopefully use it to verify if that's where the child is. And that's really what we wanted to do. And that is what the interface looks like right now. And you'll see on the left is the text search, and on the right, is that right? On the left is the text search, on the right is the image search. And if you could run the video, you'll see how the image search works. This is a video of me one night where either it's a video or I can upload an image, and it will then look at the information. Now here it's at 80% accuracy under the AWS recognition. And I should have stopped at the bottom, but you saw that at the bottom was an image of me in a different place. Different place, different dress, and everything else. So if I will put in the search, in the text search, white dress, that image will still come up. And that's what we wanted to make sure that law enforcement had access to. And now with it being able to have that image search, I can run against the system. I can say, okay, 5:00 p.m. Friday night, missing child was just recorded. Let me run it through the system, see if I can get any hits. You run it through, you put it up, and you can go home, and it will send you an email to be able to say, hey, we got a hit. The child may be here, or here's some information of where a similar image was posted. So that law enforcement can see information that they usually wouldn't get access to because they need to go onto the street and search for that child. But now we've got the technology to help search for the child, and law enforcement can use their limited resources in a different way. And that's the system that we have managed to go through with AWS to actually understand from the beginning of me going, I don't know where to start. I've done this for 15 years and I've got the same issue. You can't help me. I've tried to figure this out and can't do it. The same questions that he was saying at the beginning is like, don't know where to start, too big of a problem, don't know. And I'm not a techie. I don't know which software to use for what or how to use it, let alone does it make sense in the long term. But the nice part is that I didn't need to know because I had a team that could help us, that could help me understand, let me deal with that. You tell me what you need, and we will work through it step by step and come back to you every week to check that this is the right thing. Does this make sense? Is this right? What is wrong? What doesn't work? And every time we did another sprint, it was a case of, well, actually, sorry, I forgot something. And I need this. So it was constantly evolving at the same time, which is that agile part of it. But it's scary at the beginning because you really don't know where to start. But it's once you sit down and you really figure out those 3 questions, and you understand those 3 questions, then you can actually see the light on the other side of the tunnel and understand, okay, there is a solution to this, and it will work, and it will be successful. So that's how we started working with AWS and went through the sprint program and being able to show you that demo. And currently that demo, it's still a demo. We're working on building the actual GMC engine to make sure that every 28 country and future GMCN members will have access to be able to do this and connecting to the third parties. So I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Caroline. Really appreciate that. Whoa.
Oh,
careful,
good.
Careful. Thank you. All right. And honestly, in all the products and all the software I've ever been involved in my 18-plus years, it was one of the more worthwhile and more important ones to me. So I really appreciate you guys giving us a chance to work with you. All right. So we've got about 5 minutes left here. So just a quick recap. Again, when you're looking at a problem, when you're looking at Agile, it's more than just a process. To me, it's a mindset. If you apply that mindset to your problem, you can solve them. You can identify how to solve them, right? Work backwards. Always work backwards. Don't just start and see what happens. Have a goal in mind, right? Use that goal as your guidepost. Document it. Agree upon it. Get the stakeholders on board with you at the beginning. Have them involved all the way through. Use those goals as guideposts. And again, iterate, try, experiment. Fail fast is one of the terms people use in Agile all the time. How can I quickly iterate, learn, and make sure that I'm doing the best thing to solve this? And the AWS cloud and the values that we can bring are core components of that. Right? So for you all, if I got anything into you these days other than the great mission of ICMEC and the GMCN, what can you do to bring this home with you, right? I would say identify a core problem. It could be small, it could be big. Write a press release. Write that little blurb of how you would talk about your friends. Put it down on paper. Does it make sense? Is it easy? Is it hard? Do you have a core problem that you think you can identify and say, man, I don't know how to tackle this, right? I don't know how to start, right? Who would I solve this for? What are the core values? Write that press release. It's a really good way of starting that problem. We do that all the time inside Amazon. I've seen other customers do it as well. But it sounds simple. It's hard. It's hard.
And Ryan, another thing is ask people that aren't in your industry, because they will see it differently than you do. That was the one thing that I realized when working with Ryan and his team. They had no understanding of the issue, but they didn't need to. What they needed to know is, here's the problem, and here's how we can solve it. So it's talking to people who are not in your field to make sure that they actually understand your problem, and then be able to give you an idea of, here's something, what about this? So think of people who you can talk to outside of your industry to be able to do that as well.
Excellent point. Excellent. Thank you. And then the last one is, once you have that press release written, try to have an Inception meeting, right? Sit down with those stakeholders. Go for an hour or two. Talk about this. Hash it out. See how it works. And if you need help, obviously, you can contact us. So we've got a couple minutes left. We can take some questions. Again, please submit your review in your app. Our contact information is right here. If you feel like emailing me or Caroline directly, you can do that. So we've got 3 minutes left if anybody has a question or two. If not, we'll stick around and we can answer some questions after the fact. So again, appreciate your time. If there are any questions right now?
Everybody's eager to get their next
moving
coffee.
on to the next session. All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.